Actually, I think we have everybody because Eric Washington let me know that he was not going to be able to make it. So I think we might be at full attendance here.
I'm almost there. Okay, are we here, Joel?
Yep.
All right, well, it's good to see everyone. Sorry, Eric can't make it today. I guess we will jump right in with Joanne, who's going to give us more information on the Baltimore County data analysis, which I found to be very, very interesting.
I don't think I have access yet to share.
Oh, yes. My apologies. Give me 1 second. Share. Okay. Let me know if you're able to now. Oh, there we go.
You can see, right?
Yep.
You see the correct screen? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm in presenter view. Hold on. Sorry, you all.
Actually, do you mind if I give 30 seconds of context, though, just as a reminder here?
And share my other screen because I think that's why it's doing that.
Gotcha. So, as a reminder, it's what we sent out earlier that we are sort of had the preliminary discussion last time about these sort of 4 categories of figures that we as a work group are tasked to decide here. We asked Joanne to based on her expert assessment, to sort of take a look at what Baltimore County is doing and or the data of Baltimore County and what has happened in races in the past, and to give us sort of a framework of a starting point of where we could go with these numbers, and I think in a few cases you're providing us a few options or routes we could take. So sort of consider this a starting point for discussion. I think recommendations is a strong word for what we're calling this, but just where we could go with this. So I hope that is accurate.
Yes, it is.
Welcome back from vacation.
Hopefully you all are able to see the full. I've got like 3 different screens, so hopefully you see the PowerPoint in some capacity. Okay. Thank you again, Joel, for allowing me to kind of help facilitate this or start off this conversation. I first just want to apologize to the group for not being able to make it to the last meeting, but special thank you to Emily Scar for helping to lead that conversation. I hope that you were able to kind of get a sense of what the past 3 election cycles have looked like, and how similar to the rest of the state, the cost of running for council, county executive, obviously, is continuing to rise. Like Joel said, our goal today is to provide you with some examples of how you all might want to structure the program. Again, keeping in mind that in each jurisdiction, even though some of the models are fairly similar, this is tailored to Baltimore County and the needs of Baltimore County. So these are just things for you all to consider. Yeah, so again, these are models, and if there's any questions throughout, please tell me to pause and repeat myself. I think Emily also has a 2-page explainer as well that she'll be sharing at some point. And Emily, obviously, you should feel free to step in at any point, or if I'm not clarifying something. I think just one other flag, it's branded as Fair Elections Maryland. We all serve as part of the coalition, so Common Cause, PIRG, and partners. This is the coalition that has been leading these reforms, efforts around these reforms throughout the state. Hopefully you see. Okay. So our first piece here, I think is fairly straightforward. You know, we've kind of recommended or we've suggested 2 options for the individual contribution limit, right? This is the amount that, you know, once a candidate has opted into the Citizens Election Fund, this is the amount that they are agreeing to receiving from individuals. Now, the 250 or 150 is in line with most of the programs that exist throughout the state. Baltimore City right now is a bit of an outlier because they're at 150, the individual contribution limit. Montgomery County used to be at 150, but following the first use of their program and in their efforts, you know, to make the program more equitable, they've shifted to 250. I think the key pieces here, again, I think the 150 or 250 model is fine. We'd want to try not to go above 250. You know, the emphasis here is on small dollars being amplified in our races. And, you know, even when we're looking at the statewide gubernatorial program, the limit there is 250 as well. So that really keeps us in line. A few things to remember when we're talking about the individual contribution limit, that includes non-county residents. So if you're running for office and you live in the county, but you got a friend in Silver Spring, or you've got a cousin in Florida who wants to donate to you, they can, right? They can donate up to that limit of $250. The key piece here is that only the dollars of county residents are being matched. So this is where you're running for office, your treasurer, obviously by law is required to collect certain information anyway, but a key piece of that is going to be that individual's address in order to verify that they are in fact a resident of the county. You know, and on top of that, again, depending on whether or not the group decides to go with the 250 limit or the 150 limit. I think the one thing to keep in mind with 250 is that a lot of jurisdictions have decided, again, their emphasis is on the smaller dollars, so they're only matching the first 150. People can still give the full 250, but the matches are for the first 350s that are coming in. Now, our next piece here is the qualifying threshold, right? Now, if you are familiar with these programs, once a candidate has opted in, they don't just automatically begin receiving dollars, right? Again, these are public funds. We want these dollars to go to candidates who are deemed viable, right? Meaning that they can show that they have actual support from the people that they're seeking to represent. So what we've suggested is, again, somewhat in line with most of the jurisdictions. If someone is deciding to run for council, they would raise up to $7,500 from at least 150 residents in the county, right? So for example, I think 150 would be, I know I had this number somewhere, but they can go to X amount of candidates, you know, and ask X amount of residents and ask them for $50. No, 150 residents and get $50 from each of them in order for them to qualify to begin receiving matching funds. Again, the emphasis here is, you know, the candidate might have raised money from 500 people already, right? But we want them to prioritize, again, the folks in that jurisdiction. Similar to county executive, and this is the same in all of the jurisdictions, including Baltimore City. Of course, it's the mayor, but the county executive would be raising, or the county executive candidate, you know, trying to raise up to $40,000 from at least 500 residents. I know that might seem like a huge number, but county executive is county-wide seat. You know, this is $80, you know, from at least 500 folks. And again, there's a lot of ways to reach this number, but that is just an example. And, you know, again, we've talked about the 150 or 250, but I think the one piece here is keeping in mind that full 250 or 150 all at once, right? I can give you $5 a week from now or a month from now. I'm giving you $25 and so forth, right? You are keeping track of the aggregate, and matches begin at that first 5 if I'm an eligible contributor, meaning that I live in the county. I think the one other thing to flag, these numbers might seem overwhelming, especially for county executive. But when you look at just the 2018 election cycle, for example, pretty much all of the county executive candidates were bringing in contributions from well over at least 1,000 donors for donations of under $250. These don't necessarily mean they're from county residents, but again, they're already bringing in pool of small dollars. The only shift here is that they want to focus more on small dollars from the people that they're seeking to represent in that jurisdiction. And I want to pause and just make sure I'm not running too quickly, but everyone is understanding why someone who's opted in needs to actually qualify in order to begin receiving these funds. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Joanne, I have a quick question. Yeah, I have a quick question. I was talking about the opting in process. So is there anything about a candidate's prior fundraising history being determinative at all if they're eligible for the program, in the sense that if someone the day before saying that they're going to do this takes in a bunch of max 6,000 donations, and then the next day says, oh, I'm doing this now, is there anything that would prohibit that?
No, if they are opting in before the deadline, the registration deadline, they wouldn't be able to use the money that's in that other account. Yeah, and it may be for a number of reasons, right? Maybe someone didn't know. I'm just giving a random example, but maybe someone was considering a run, right? And then they literally just found out, that there's a program available and they understand how to use it. They just wouldn't be able to use the funds that are in that other account. They would open this public financing one.
Got it. So they want to be able to use the money raised prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thanks.
Not for this race.
I'm sorry if you covered this already. Are the number of donations, is that from anybody or is that limited to county residents?
No, these are county residents.
Okay.
So even if a council candidate has raised money from 500 folks, if they don't live in the county or only 10 of them are in the county, you are not deemed, I shouldn't say not viable, but again, you wouldn't be eligible for the match yet up until you can show that you have support from county residents. Now, this is, I think, the more critical piece, the match cap, right? Like how much someone who is running for county executive, county council is actually going to be eligible to receive if they've opted into the program. I think our goal is not to drive up the cost of, our elections, right? But we want to ensure that the candidate who is choosing to use these programs, that they're not at a disadvantage, right? They need to be competitive, able to, reach constituents in whatever strategy they're using, and they need the funds to be able to do so. So we're recommending at least, or suggesting again, at least $100,000 for council. I know that might seem high, but again, when you're looking at the cost of running for council in the county and the way that it's been increasing, I think that in order for a candidate to truly run a fairly competitive race, they need to be able to make that amount, receive that amount in order to be competitive. And I think when we look at the county executive race, even though the research that we did when looking at the 3 elections was on average, we were at around 68,000. When we look at the 2018 election cycle, we had a huge peak. Right, we had county executive candidates that were at well over $1 million to $2 million. So it's safe to assume that someone running for county executive, in order to be competitive, that you need to run a race that's at least at $1 million, right? So $750,000, I think, helps to get a candidate there, keeping in mind that that match is in addition to the dollars that someone is already bringing in. And we'll go through some examples, but again, 100,000, 750,000, fairly in line with a lot of the jurisdictions. But again, the council number especially is being recommended based on the cost here in the county.
Well, Joanne, do you want me to wait for later, or you
No,
aren't
you can do it.
before? But one of the things I was able to do was just looking at the numbers that you guys produced and saw tremendous inaccuracies in the number. One of the things that, from what I understand, you gathered the number from one election cycle to the next. And so the first thing I looked at was like my race. I knew what I spent in my race, which was like less than $50,000. And but you had a big number for me spending. But what happens in Baltimore County, we don't have any discretionary fund. So if a little league baseball team comes to me and say, Councilman, can you sponsor our team? Okay, I reach into my campaign account and I take out $500 and sponsor their team. If somebody says, hey, can you help us with fireworks? We're doing this, we're doing that. So when you look at the monies that council members spend in Baltimore County, and you go from one election cycle to the next and count all 4 years, you're counting every dollar we spent. Many of those dollars are going to community programs or community projects, and you're wrapping them all up. And it's given an inflated amount of money that we don't spend here in Baltimore County.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess it goes back to what I was saying. We want people to be able to get their message out, but we don't want it to become like an arms race. Because if you told somebody that they're going to raise that they can get $100,000 for county council, which by the way, I'm a councilman, I ran for office a few times. That's an awful lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of money that people just are not spending.
I mean, I think there's three different. I mean, obviously, every county, every jurisdiction is unique, right? I think the use of money that is coming in through your campaign, your political committees is I think that is a Baltimore County specific thing, and maybe possibly some other jurisdictions. But what we're looking at when doing the research, again, is what money is going out of your campaign account, right? It doesn't matter if it's being used for your campaign or not. The money came in because an individual supported you as a candidate, right? So it's still a candidate expenditure. It's still being reported to, the state board and so forth. So I understand the concern, but it is still an expense being made through your candidate account, right? And it's safe to assume that, again, I know the Little League situation this is a unique situation, and I'm not saying that you're making, it sounds like there's a need and that you're not making these donations hoping that they're gonna, I don't know, throw your name or put your yard signs out in the field or anything like that. But one can still assume that because the donations are being made out of your account, that it does still have some level of influence, over the decision makers, those who run the Little League team, the possible parents if they know those donations are coming from you, and so forth. I think another piece to remember is that you are an incumbent, right? So your expenses as an incumbent are not going to be the same for someone, a non-traditional candidate who maybe is stepping in to run against you, or a sitting member of the council, right? You have a lot of name recognition. You've done a lot of your work during your time on the council. So if I'm running against you, right, and you're running using 50, you were able to run using 50K, but if you got a serious challenger, right, it's safe to assume that one, they need more money than you in order to get name recognition in the county, and that them running and running this competitive race will lead to you having to use more funds in your account. I think the one other flag here is I think this leads to a larger concern that I think the county might have to look at, and it's the community grant process, right? And I don't know, we don't work on community grants and so forth, but I do hear a need, and it shouldn't be where, I mean, it's great that you're willing to do that, right? But it shouldn't be where you have to, right? It should be where your funds are being used to support your candidacy or other possible candidates. So I think what the county might have to do, and we'd be willing to support if I'm able to, is look at creating a community grant system where, those groups are able to get the support that they need. It's not sustainable, right? It's safe to assume that if someone comes in after you, they might not raise money in the same way that you do. They might not be able to, give funds to these groups in the future. But again, the numbers, they're not, I mean, I get the concern in terms of inflation, but again, it's still money that is going in and coming out of the candidate committee, right? So it's still funds that are being used as a candidate, if that makes sense.
Well, it does not make too much sense. I understand your straight line, but I guess the point is, if we're talking about monies for someone to run for office, and I'm identifying where monies are being spent, not on running for office, it's being spent on, as you say, community benefits, to somehow say it doesn't matter, all the money coming in and going out should be matched. I mean, it begs the question, what are we trying to do? To me, what we're trying to do is make sure people are able to get their message out. Not to say that they should have as much money as everybody else in the race, because some people are going to have more money just because they're funding themselves. But I understand what you're saying, but I just think it's not fair to say it doesn't matter. And if you spent the money 3 years ago on a Little League team, money came in and you spent it, and therefore somebody else should be able to get it. I say all of these things is to say $100,000 seems like a lot of money. The research you've done is flawed. David Marks can attest. I've been trying to get my colleagues to come up with a system for years. After all, we're the county council. We can appropriate. We don't have to ask anybody for permission to make such a fund. All we have to do is say we're going to do it. But I cannot get my colleagues to go along with that. They've been doing something for many years, which is paying their campaign funds, and that's what they choose to do. And they choose not to be involved in some other type of program.
I want to try and respond as.
Can I add something, Joanne?
Yes.
I think what you're bringing up is a real point, and there's only so much you can do with data analysis. So having your and Councilman Mark's feedback on the data is really helpful. And I think there's a similar but different tension with the data, which is looking at the races for the last 3 years. There is a wide range of how much it costs to run in each district. And so there are some districts where, District 6, and I think it often depends on if it's an open seat, right, or if it's an incumbent versus a challenger. But in 2018, we saw District 6, both candidates spending close to $200,000. In 2014, we saw District 3, where candidates are spending $160,000 to $240,000, both the challenger and the one who won. We have a bunch of these races where it is actually costing that much, both for the person who wins and the person who lost. So it's valuable to get this feedback to be like, were those people just totally throwing away the money? Because we sort of have to look at it being a match that's going to work for someone to feel like they can opt in every single district to be competitive. And I get that ultimately what that means is that there's going to be more money than some people need in other districts. And that's definitely what we found in Baltimore City, where we have 1 or 2 districts that are so expensive and a couple others where they're really not spending that much. So we err on the side of leaning towards the more expensive district because we want to make sure that candidates in all districts are feel like they can opt into the program and see it as a viable option. And then the good news is we found so far, at least, that it's not actually easy to get this money. So candidates aren't going to do we haven't seen yet, and we can always respond if we do. We haven't seen this arms race type of behavior. Candidates do the fundraising they need to feel like they need to run a competitive race, and they're not going to go get all the money and cap out if they don't need to. That's not to say it would necessarily be a problem, but that risk is one I've been willing to take to ensure that candidates in the more expensive districts opt in.
I do want to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind if I jump in, I think the 100,000 is too high. Just keep in mind, we have to get this through the council, and there was 5 votes to put this on the ballot, so there's already some trepidation in the council about the program to begin with. You know, I mentioned this before. I think with social media and the densely populated nature of most of our districts, a challenger can wage an aggressive race. A flawed candidate, no matter how much money he or she spends, can lose an election. And we've seen that over the past 10 years. We've also seen situations where yeah, you're right, Julian. Looking at you, and there was another race I was thinking of. But you look at my district last time where I had an opponent who barely spent any money, and because of the pro-democratic nature of that race, nearly beat me in Towson. And I worked my butt off in Towson, but it was just such a strong Democratic year. So I think you're on the right path. My opinion is I just think 100,000 is a bit too high.
And again, these are suggestions, right?
Yeah.
We are sharing numbers that we think might work. Again, keeping in mind that I'm also applying an equity lens here. I want to ensure that hopefully more women are on the council, more people of color and so forth. And we know that looking at some of the previous races, they haven't been able to raise the funds that they need in order to be competitive. And we want them to be able to step in and run competitive races. And again, just keeping in mind the incumbent is, right? I think that's important to remember. The way that the incumbent is spending money on their races is not going to be the same as the person who is stepping in and wanting to make the case to voters. So we're not stuck to the $100,000. This is county, and I think this is where voters and previous candidates who maybe have ran and lost might obviously will be stepping in to make their voices heard as well. But we defer to you all. Again, these are suggestions. And I also just want to make sure I'm defending our research. We spent a lot of time on it. So this idea of it being inflated, like I hear the concern. But again, legally, like this is the money being spent as a candidate account. This is the money coming in. And I would just air the council to seriously consider taking a look at sustainable ways to support the work of community groups, right? Donors a lot of times are not giving you donations, even in the best way, but they're giving funds to support your races and not necessarily those efforts, right? So I think there's a larger thing here that has to be addressed, and that likely can't be addressed through the program. But I just want to be sure, again, since we're on the record,
and those are all
defending our research.
Yeah. And the incumbents get free media too. I mean, look, I've been in the Baltimore Sun twice this week. Now, it's things that I think I'm doing a good job with and I'm proud of, but we get free media, and I think that's a fair point as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you a question. This is just backing up a little bit because I've been doing a little bit of research myself, and I was thinking to myself, is it fair for us to only look at Maryland when this is like in the infancy stage? I mean, I was looking at places like Arizona and Maine that's been doing similar things since 2000. So I was wondering, did you guys take a look at any of those things?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we have. And if you look at those states, a lot of times it's Common Cause, PIRG, and similar partners, that are working and building out those reforms. An extensive amount of time was worked, just in building the Montgomery program and improving the governor's program. So it is something that we've taken into consideration. And again, there's room for you all to consider other models if that's something that you want to do. But our orgs work on campaign finance reform. We're familiar with programs that exist in other states, and we've crafted programs that we think for now at least work really well. And even though Montgomery County is, I guess, considered still in its infancy state, we had an overwhelming number of candidates step in, county council at large, council district. I think we've got a great model, and by the time Baltimore County uses this program, Montgomery County would have used it again, in addition to Howard County, right? So I think we've got a lot of models and testing that we could look at, in addition to DC as well, which is right next door. But I think, again, this is the county's program. So if there are other things that the county wants to consider, definitely, but we certainly have looked at other programs, and I encourage members of the work group to do so as well if you haven't.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's any specific points, Councilman, from the other programs. When we did Montgomery County, I'd say was the first wave of like new programs that had been done in recent years. And one of the ones that had been done after some bad Supreme Court decisions, which had changed the options for the model. So we look most closely at New York City and what had been done at the city council level there to build off of, and in partnership with a bunch of national groups at the time. I'd say the key difference between Maryland's program and what we've seen in Maine and Arizona, Connecticut, is the tiered match. We're the first state to shift from just giving a matching fund for small donations to a tiered match where it's really incentivizing small donors. But I don't think there's other major distinctions that aren't just driven by legal requirements of the federal government.
Okay, let me just ask one more question. Well, I don't want to interrupt the program. I can wait till it's done. I'll wait till the presentation is over.
No, it's fine. It's better to have the discussion.
No, I was just thinking, is there a spending limit? Would we put a spending limit on it?
We'll get to it we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yes, and just one other flag, keeping in mind Maryland's program has been celebrated nationwide. And, you know, if you look at the For the People Act, which is before Congress right now, the tiered match system is it's mirroring Maryland's program, right? This is something that Sarbanes has championed all throughout the country, and hopefully we're on path to following Maryland's lead here.
Okay.
I have one quick question that's more technical, but or a smaller point, but I think some, but not all of the other Maryland jurisdictions tied these numbers to the consumer price index, in that, like, at the end of a cycle, they'll go up with inflation. Did you have a particular suggestion whether to do that or not?
I think I think it's all of, Emily, if I'm correct, I think all the jurisdictions have done that. I think Baltimore City did as well.
They tied either to CPI or something. I don't have strong opinions on this. I know some of our national partners did, so we can go back and look at it. I think though, from our perspective, is it's potentially, yes, it could tie it to something. Some national groups may have strong opinions on how you calculate that, but we see it more of a living program. Like, you always need to just go back and revisit it. That's where you're going to have a commission and other folks to this is not one and done. Every cycle, you may need to go just check and see if something needs to be tweaked, or every 2 cycles. So that's vague, and we can follow up to find out exactly what our recommendations were, because it wasn't something neither Joanne or I were throwing ourselves on the track for, but other folks had opinions, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I lost my train of thought. So what we've done is we've kind of shared 2 sample tiered match systems, right? And actually 3, because if you look at the document that Emily has or will put in the chat, I can't see, it has a 3rd sample. We obviously, again, are not tied to these. We just want to ensure that everyone in the work group understands how the tiered match system works, and how, what every dollar would amount to. So in this first model, and again, if you're looking at the document, it lays it out as well. But in the first model, we're recommending a match, when we're looking at council candidates at least, a match for the first $100, right? Again, amplifying the smaller dollars that are coming in with no match for the final $150. And in my next slide, I will go into how much that amounts to. But for the candidate who raises between the 150 to 250, this would mean a match 150 to 250 per individual. This would equal a match of up to $550 per individual. Now for county executive, the model is a bit different. Their match is for the first 150 with no match for the last 100, a 742, meaning that the county executive candidate who brings in, again, eligible, meaning a Baltimore County resident who donates at least the 150 to 250, again, depending on what you go with, that they're eligible for a $650 match. And my next screen kind of, again, lays it out for you and understanding what that amounts to. But again, based on this tiered match system, council candidates would be eligible for up to $550 of a match per 250. County executive candidates, $650 per 250.
Put that in the chat. I don't know if people saw it.
In the chat. Okay. And I'm gonna try and walk through this slowly because I want to make sure we all understand, because I think this is what's going to help us determine what the tiered system is going to look like, right? So a council candidate receives $250 from, I'm going to pick on Samay because Samay lives in the county, but Samay, right? Samay's $250 equals $800, right? And this is because of that $550 match. So the first $50, meaning that between the 5 and the 50 is eligible for the match, but the first $50 is multiplied by 5, right? Remember the match here is 5 to 1. So that $50 amounts to $250 in addition to the 50 that was originally donated. The second 50, again, it's the 3 to 1 match here. The second 50 is multiplied by 3 to 1, or 3 to 1, that amounts to 150. I hope I'm explaining it. I feel like there's no clear way to explain it fully, but again, we are multiplying that first $50 match by 5 in order to get to the $250 in addition to the $50 that the individual has given. So $300. That second 50, again, this is cumulative, right? I've given my first 50, maybe I've given you 100 in full, and so forth. So I want to pause there because I feel like the way that I'm explaining it, hopefully the layout shows it clearly and the document does. But I want to make sure folks are understanding how we're breaking it down. So if I give $100 at once, I think that's the best way of looking at the council. If I give $100 at once, right, that first 50 is still, matched at the 5 to 1 rate. And then that additional 50 is matched at the 3 to 1 rate. So my $100 becomes $354, $500. Yeah. And for county executive, the $250 donation, again, keeping in mind if you go with $250 or $150, but the $250, assuming there's no match for that final $500, amounts to $900. That $250 plus the $650 in matches. So we have a 742 match for county executive, meaning that the first 50 is, multiplied. The first 50 is multiplied by 7. So you got the 350 plus the original 50, second 50 by 4, amounting to 200 plus the original 50, and the third 50 amounting to $100 plus the original 50. So, an individual, Samay is donating, and Samay's $250. If he wants to donate to the county executive candidate, obviously goes a lot further and is equal to $900.
So would it make sense for someone to say, don't give me $250, go out and find me 4 more donors and give me $50 a piece. And now my $250 for council became $1,250. And I do the same thing for county executive. Don't give me a check for $250. Go find your brother, sister, cousin, uncle, give them $50 a piece and let them bring it to you. And now that same $250 becomes $1,750.
That's illegal. That still remains illegal.
Yeah. Wait, so you're saying
you can't pay someone to make a donation on your behalf. No one can do that in a program. You can do that in a program. You can go tell your friend, I like this candidate, you should give them $50 too. But you cannot give someone $50 to donate to a candidate.
No. No. I mean, so if I use Brandy Brooks in Montgomery County as an example here, Brandy Brooks, ran in 2020, whenever our elections were, and she opted for the longer route, right? She could have asked people for the full 150. Her strategy instead was to focus on the small dollars, which meant she had to spend more time going to more people. But she did that because the smaller dollar amounts to a greater match. And because, again, most people can afford $50, and if we're thinking of average everyday folks, they might not be able to give you $250. So I think in a sense, what you're saying is, should candidates be encouraging, people who donate $50 to go to their friends and tell them that, hey, your dollar goes a lot further here and you might want to support this candidate or support people who have opted into this program? Definitely, right? But should individuals be giving dollars to others to donate on their behalf? you know, again, we would not encourage that. I'm pretty sure candidates who find out, again, they are the best folks at reporting these types of illegal activity. But yeah, you should be, again, the goal here is to amplify the smaller dollars that, again, average everyday people are able to afford. And I say this as still a young person at a nonprofit who can't just cut checks for $250 to give out, right? It's just not something I'm able to do, but I'm able to give $50. And I just want to give, oh, sorry. Did I cut someone off? No? Okay. And I kind of wanted to give an example of how this might work for a candidate based on that sample. Again, that's just an example model. Every jurisdiction does it how they want, and we usually are okay with it. Our goal is to just make sure the matches don't go into the double digits, right? But for the candidate who wants to, or in order for a candidate to reach the full match, again, this is one example, right? Let's say they've opted for the strategy of going for 150 each. It probably won't work out that way, but again, that's one way they might be able to get to the full amount, right? So that candidate would have to bring in donations from at least 181 donors in the county. And that amounts to the $27,150. That is the actual donation in order for them to receive the full match. And again, this is assuming this is only for the first 150. If you go with the 250 and that last 100 isn't matched, you know, there is still that extra money in there as well, right? But again, this shows you that someone running for council can raise up to $127,000, if not more, using the program. And for county executive, again, keeping in mind our goal is to ensure that they're able to get near the million in order to be competitive. For county executive, they're reaching out to a lot more donors in the county. So if they were going for the $150 model, again, keeping in mind that I might give you 150 over a few months, you know, aggregate, you're going to 1,153 donors in the county in order to receive the full $750,000, right? So I hope this kind of lays out, and again, it can work out in a number of different ways. You might have people that only give you $10, right? And so forth. Yeah, you might have folks that kind of give smaller amounts than this, but this is just to get you to understand how it might work, how someone might get to the full match, and how these amounts, again, ensure that a candidate is able to be as competitive as they need to be in this race. And I think the one other piece here is that it shows you, again, that it's not easy to get to the $100,000, right? So I know that number, we are not stuck to it at all, but someone has to be doing amazing outreach in the county, you know, in order for them to be able to reach the full match, right? Assuming that most donors, again, are not going to give you the 150 either. I'm going to pause there before I go to the next model and just make sure folks kind of understand how the tiers work, how this is just one example. Again, keeping in mind that there are going to be folks who give you $10, there are going to be folks who give 20, there will be people who give you the full 250, right? So for council candidates, it'll probably be well over 150 donors in the county in order for them to reach the match. Okay. So we have a second model. Again, suggestion. This one's a bit different in that we are looking at the first $25, right? We've kind of, again, we're focused a lot more on the smaller dollars and no match for that remaining $100. We've also made it where it's fairly easy. I shouldn't say easy, but not confusing at all in that the tiered matches are the same for both candidates, right? Or both offices. So it's 751 matches for the first 150, no match for the last 100. I think most jurisdictions start off with matches for the first 50. I think Prince George's program is a bit different in that it starts off with the 25, and possibly Baltimore City as well. Now, similar to the other tiered match example, this similar structure, the only difference here is that we are taking the first $25 into consideration, right? So the example, we'll go with council example, the first 25 matched at a 7-to-1 match, so 175 plus their original 25, so $200. The second 50, so meaning someone is given a full 75 or in between there, matched at a 5-to-1, so 250 plus their original 50 of 300, and then a third match for that flat $75. So someone has given you at least 150 in order to get the $500 match. And because the tiered matches are the same, the match is the same. So Seme, I keep picking on Seme, but Seme's 250 here amounts to 750 for both roles. Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, I think we can do different tiers for the different roles, but I do think, if you want to try and eliminate confusion where you can, having the tiered matches be somewhat similar helps as well. And then just another example, right? So this one's a bit different in that we've started off with the first 25, but still you see council candidates are still needing to reach, if assuming residents are giving 150, they're still needing to reach at least 200 donors, 200 Baltimore County residents in order to receive the full match, knowing that most residents, it's going to be well over $200 because most people are not going to give you the flat 150. I think folks with a base, oh, and sorry for the E that's cut off here, but folks with a base of support, it might be easier, obviously, because you've got folks already, but for others, they're having to reach a lot of new people. In county executive, you see at least 1,500 donors throughout the county, 1,500 residents throughout the county at that $150 rate. Yeah, so bringing them near the million, near the 100+ K, near the 100,000. And
I would just say that at this point it's pretty clear. This is a little bit of art, a little bit of science. Like, you can do these matches 8 gajillion ways. Here's my son. And I think that looking at the total value of how much they receive for a donation is helpful, because it mostly just shows how quickly they are going to be getting public funds, how likely they are to receive their match. So that's why it's helpful to look at what the total value for $150 contribution is. And you'll see on the sheet I shared, they're even a little bit different than what Joanne had.
Mm-hmm.
So it can feel like this is like a big decision, but really it's kind of subtle what the numbers change.
Yeah.
A lot of it is about public perception. Like, you can do a 7-to-1 match for the first 25, and it makes, you're really incentivizing that first 25, or you can do a 7-to-1 match for the first 50, and it doesn't really change the program that much. So a little bit of this is like public messaging and what message you want to send with these numbers.
Mm-hmm. And the goal here, again, keeping in mind, these programs aren't set up to be easy to qualify or easy to receive the full match. But again, we don't want to make it unattainable, right? So, and I think also when we're looking at the donations that come in right now, even though there are Maryland donors, a lot of them aren't actually coming from within the county as well. So the emphasis is, the candidates having to spend a lot more time, encouraging, or I shouldn't say encouraging, but getting folks in the county to support them financially in addition to a vote. So I'm going to pause there, Joel. I'm going to see if I could stop sharing my screen. But I'm open to more questions and obviously feedback. This is hopefully, I don't know what I'm doing. But again, these are just examples to get you all thinking about what program is going to work best for Baltimore County. I don't live in the county, right? So we're just here to make sure that we're setting up a program that works for the candidates who are opting in, right? That we're not putting them in a position where they're at a disadvantage or where people don't want to opt in because it doesn't look like they're going to be able to raise enough to run their races. And hopefully you all got to see the document.
I think you're muted, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I was saying, are you done? So I didn't hear, was there any spending limits at all?
Oh, sorry, I did not say that. No, or no, no spending limits.
Okay,
So a candidate who, even if you have reached the full match cap, I'm sorry, even if you've raised, you've gotten to the full 100K match, you've maxed out, you are still able to, one, continue fundraising. You can continue to receive $250 from anyone, but no, there is no expense on how much you can spend. The funds are there to use for candidate use, and any money, well, I shouldn't say, in most jurisdictions, any funds that remain typically go back into the fund. Baltimore, Montgomery County, I think, is the one jurisdiction. They've made some recent amendments that allow for funds to remain. I forgot how we set it up, but there are some funds that kind of remain in order for them to keep their website up and running and all of that. So I think, to Emily's point previously, after the programs are used, we continue to find ways to come back and improve them, but no expense on no limit on how much you can spend.
but the contribution limit will stay in place.
Yes, the individual contribution limit.
Okay, and I know Samay had said something earlier, I guess last meeting about individuals who choose to give their own campaign fund.
A
There's no
loan.
limit on an individual, right?
There are.
We didn't make recommendations for that, but every other county has set some limit for personal donations or loans to a campaign account. I like 6,000 or an aggregate of 12,000. That has varied a little bit county by county. And Samay, I think, was saying he wants it to be 0. So that, you all can weigh in on that as well. We've mostly stayed out of that, but I do think there should be a limit because the whole point is for people, not self-funding to use this program.
Yeah, and I wasn't here for that discussion, but my one limit completely with it, we don't know what the amount should be, but my one piece of feedback is, especially for the first time candidates, a lot of times in order for you to be able to reach all of these people, right, you need to be able to set up an account to begin with, right? You need to get your website up. You might need, although yard signs don't win elections, you might need yard signs and so forth, right? So a candidate needs to be able to get their campaign up and running in order for them to actually begin to, hopefully get near qualifying.
Yeah, I think just since it was brought up, I think what my general idea there is that there should be a cap, and I think the bigger thing is loans. Like I think that's the thing that there should be a really, I would say, a very low cap on, because I think that's the big thing where, like I know some candidates, not necessarily for council, but for House of Delegates and the Senate, who have essentially loaned themselves like $500,000 to run. And for everyday people like me, we can't take out those kind of loans. I can put up a couple $100 to do what Joanne is saying. So I think those contributions from oneself to oneself is fine. But I think it's the loan aspect that really should have a really low and hard cap on to prevent that sort of thing. So.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we're never going to be fair 100%, right? There's always going to be people with advantages and not advantages. But it's certainly appropriate to have some stipulation or some expectations of what we expect people to do or not do when we're giving them public funds.
So as far as how we move forward, just in terms of how I sort of put things up on screen here, because I think that document that Emily shared reflects their recommendation or their suggestions and options. So I can sort of, if it's helpful to the work group, I can sort of have that pulled up as a good summary, and then if you want, switch back and forth to what other jurisdictions have done, if that would be useful. That presentation I gave the first meeting, because I want folks to, be able to see those tangible things as we're talking about them. But
it does make sense to put the recommendations beside the other jurisdictions and see where they fall. I'm not sure if we can do that. Can we do it? We can do it.
I can do that in 1 second. Share. What are you guys seeing right now? No, that's
Cisco or your Webex.
there we go. Okay. How about now? Okay.
Yep.
So here we have this summary document that they created. Thank you guys for all your hard work in putting that together. If folks want me to switch back to what we've done in other jurisdictions or read them out, whatever is easiest. But Ms. Chair, did you want to move into sort of the decision discussion period of?
Let me ask one more question. Are there any limits on or with the other jurisdictions and other places around the country? Are there any stipulations on the contribution? In other words, could a person have a bake sale and sell cakes for $25, and every cake would count as a contribution? Or could a person give a dance every Friday night and say, everybody who comes in the club and give me $25, I will count that as a contribution or a donation to the campaign? Are there any stipulations on these contributions? Do they, can there be value associated with the donation?
I mean, I think with the dance, for example, if it's a campaign event, it's a fundraiser, right? I think similar to a house party or whatever else it might be, you're paying X amount admission to come and participate in this event. That would be possible, right? We want candidates to look to host these type of smaller community events that are more affordable compared to a lot of the events that we might see sometimes where, again, right, they're tiered and maybe you're the super donor who's giving $3,000, but there's another level at $100. So yeah, candidates would be able to host an event, an official campaign event where contributions are being made to their account. As for the bake sale.
No, just use that as an example. I mean, the bake sale
Okay.
would be the same thing, and it's as you indicated. No, only reason I guess said it because I've been getting a lot of questions from people, and one of the things that the guy was talking about, the guy's a promoter, and every weekend he gives a dance. Every weekend prior to COVID, he's giving a party someplace, and that's his business. And he was saying, well, all I got to do is call it a donation and I can like triple my money. I said, well, you got to run for office. He says, okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good question for Jared Damaris, the Board of Elections. There are same stipulations or exist for any other donation. So, and it's something you could add in. In Connecticut, they've added a lot of requirements for what you're allowed to spend the money on, or for example, I think we've erred on the side of not recommending that to not deal with a problem that doesn't exist, but you are required to fill out some pretty comprehensive reporting. So you can't just take $25 from cash from someone and call it a donation, because you have to have their address, their employment, really thorough accounting in order for it to count as a qualifying contribution in the system.
Okay.
So I think we should follow up with Jared to confirm, because I honestly don't know.
No, you are right. Again, and in this instance, if the candidate is a DJ, right, and the DJ wants to use their skills to host an event, a campaign event where the funds are being reported and so forth, they can, right? And I, as a donor, as a constituent who is looking to learn more about your campaign, I would assume that during your DJing event, you are also talking about your platform, right? But again, this is assuming that the candidate has qualified and in order to even begin receiving matching funds. But non-candidates, folks who have not opted into the program would not be able to receive matched funds, and it wouldn't be for activity that is not related to their campaign.
Okay.
And if it's helpful, maybe what we can do also, maybe as we get closer to developing, the model that you all think works best, I'm sure Jared Demarinus at the state board would be happy to join and answer questions and provide feedback.
Yes, he actually did make that offer when I spoke to him a few months ago, so I think that would probably be a good idea.
It is a good idea. And I know that at some point, I would like for us to have an opportunity to, let some folks from the public make some, contributions to what we're doing. I know it was asked of me during the last meeting that Joanne, you and I were on with my revolution, our revolution. People asked about it, and I thought, why not? We can give people an opportunity to weigh in. So why don't we just jump right in and start with where do you want to go first? The contribution limit. How do people feel about the contribution limit? Being, I don't know, whatever, 250 or less or more, or how does everybody feel about that?
I like 200. Right in the middle, 200.
What say everyone else? Danae, where are you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 250. I mean, 200 or 250. I'd say stick with 250 for sake of staying the same with other jurisdictions who have done it, and with the gubernatorial option being 250 as well. That's where I would stand.
I can go with 250.
Phyllis, what do you think? Can't hear you. Still cannot hear you.
I agree. I would defer to the two council people who have campaigned quite often, but I think 250 is, the league would support that.
Yeah, I mean, I can go with 250 on that.
Okay.
So I'll make that motion that it be 250.
Okay, so why don't we'll just go along right now in a less formal way. It looks like we have at least consensus. I don't know if there's anybody else here that let me see, did we miss anybody? I think 250 seems reasonable. So then the next question would be, do you want to go straight to the limits in terms of the total amount of funds that we will be giving out and then back into the breakdown, or just stick with the breakdowns first in terms of, the matching limits? How much, the chart is 7-to-1, the 5-to-1. For the first $50 gets this, the second $50 get that. How do you want to go at it? You want to go with the big number first, or the process? How do you get to the big number?
Maybe, since I think my hunch is that there might be the most level of or the least the most level of discussion on the big number, that maybe we keep that for last and start with the qualifying.
Okay,
Sure.
that's fair enough, but I was just thinking, you got to figure out where you're trying to go. If you go the other way, you set up a system and you don't, in other words, you don't know what it would take to max the system out and let you come up with the total amount first. Even though I agree that that's going to be probably the source of.
Well, we'll have to get into it either way. So why don't we go? That makes sense. Why don't we go ahead and talk about the total?
Yeah, I mean, having I don't know much about Montgomery County. Actually, I know a lot about Montgomery County. I know an awful lot about Prince George's County, having never lived there as much as I can. But what I do know in Baltimore County, $100,000 is, in my opinion, an awful lot of money for running for county council. And it's my goal, I've said it before, is to make sure that people are able to get their message out and give people a choice. Not so much as to make sure that they have as much money as everybody else. The reality is there's always going to be somebody out there with more money. And my fear is there is an arms race. If you told me today that my opponent could get $100,000 to run against me, then I will go out and make sure that my job all of a sudden becomes not to get $100,000 and feel comfortable, but my job then becomes to make sure I get 200,000, 300,000. So whatever the purpose is of whatever we're doing would be exacerbated because you would cause people to go out and get more money.
I agree
That's
with
my
Julian. I
opinion.
agree with Julian. I agree with you, Julian. And I'll just repeat this. We have to get this proposal through the county council. And I will speak up for our work, but there was caution among the council about even creating this program. That's why I think we should go lower than what's recommended.
And I was going to say 2 comments. That makes total sense, and I think if you all think $75,000 can get folks in all districts, I'll take your word for it and ask around some more. 2 things I would note is, yeah, I worry about an arms race. The one thing I worry less about is public funding being an arms race. I'm sorry, my daughter, mad. Remembering that where this money comes from. So I don't like big money in politics. I don't like elections costing a lot of money, but I feel more comfortable with it if all that money is coming from small donors that are being matched than it's someone going out and raising corporate money, large donors. So to me, the problem with money in politics isn't the volume of money being raised or spent, it's where it's coming from. So still not great if we're driving up the cost, but I'm a little bit less concerned. And on your point on the optics, yeah, that's a real thing. It looks like, oh, $100,000 just seems large. When we're doing the cost of the program, the thing that really costs money is the county executives. Whether you're matching 75,000 or 80,000 or 90,000 is really amounts to like $100,000 in the budget over 4 years. So that's just my note. I think wherever you all land between 75 and 100, hopefully will be sufficient. We'll find out.
Well, actually, I wanted to go below 75,000. I thought 75,000 was a
Got
good
it.
money. I'm thinking somewhere around 50 or 60,000.
I think I'm going to be the person to always continue to challenge y'all a bit and making sure that the program is equitable, right? And that non-traditional candidates who don't have access to resources and who don't have a base of donors already and all of that, that they're actually able to run competitive races, and that we don't create a system where individuals don't want to opt in because of how low the match is. So I don't think we need to go to the 100, but 60K is under what any jurisdiction, hold on, I have it up in front of me, but that is lower than what any jurisdiction provides. The lowest that we've gone is 75K in Prince George's County for council district. But Prince George's County, again, gives 200K to county at large, and so forth. And the next to lowest is 85,000 for council district in Howard County. So we'd be creating a system that provides the lowest match out of all of the jurisdictions in a jurisdiction where, it's fairly, again, understanding the situation and so forth, but district by district, the cost to run is well over 50K.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Joanne in that line. I mean, I personally think 75 should be the absolute floor that we're discussing, and I think it should be more. And here's the reason why: is I think it's really important to remember that for say tomorrow I wanted to run, I don't have nearly the name recognition that whoever the sitting council person would have. And so you have to account for that. And in sort of the idea that it's going to create an arms race, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because by the same thing, if we set it at 75,000, you'll just make the person, whoever I'm running against, will make sure that they raise 100,000, right? So I mean, and if you set it at 60, they'll make sure they raise at least 80. Right, so I think it's kind of self-fulfilling to say that you can't raise it because it'll get matched, because that'll happen at any number that you set.
Well,
And I think it's really important what Joanne is saying is that the people that this is targeted to are folks who in the past didn't think about running because they couldn't raise money effectively. And so I think to say that, yeah, now you can raise using a public financing option, but we're going to handicap you by putting it just at what people are raising right now for incumbent reelection. I don't know if that's really, to me that starts to seem like we're maybe doing more motion than actual action, right? We're giving people this notion that you can do this, but really we're handicapping them. And so I definitely think that 75 needs to be the floor. And you know what? If it ends up being that now the incumbent wants to try and raise $200,000 through large corporate donations, then so be it. I mean, then that's part of the race. That's part of the race is that now that person, is gonna, if I'm the person using the public financing option, I say, well, look at this. This person sees a challenger, and all of a sudden they're running to their corporate sponsors to get more money. I think, that's part of the campaign then, right? Is showing folks, who's really in it for them. Is it the person running on the public financing option, or the person running the corporate PACs to make up now because they're getting a fire lit underneath them? That's my choice. I really don't think that going under 75,000 makes much sense. I think that should be the bare minimum that we're discussing.
well,
And I also want to bring this up too. I mean, it's not just diversity, like we've been saying. It's also political diversity, right? A Green Party candidate, a Republican in a majority Democratic county. There's a thing to be said for competition of good ideas. And I think that's important as well. I could see your point about the 80,000, and I'm also thinking that this will take effect in 2026. I'm sure that the postal rates will go up in 2026 for mail-in, right? And it's probably 60 cents, the mail letter by then. So I can see your point perhaps about going up.
Well, I guess the only issue I have, and I guess this goes back to the notion of equity. A person, I guess the question, it goes back to, should we be willing to make sure that every person in our community have an equal opportunity to get this money and in fact run for office? Because in reality, it's been my experience, the people that will do well, they've already been putting in the work. They already have a base. They already have name recognition. The community already know who they are because of their deeds. And I guess the question for me when we start talking about equity is, do we really want anyone to be able to just come along and say, I want to run for office and have done nothing, and then we somehow fund enough money so that their name recognition can be the same as the person who's out working every day for the community?
Well, respectfully, sorry, Joanne, you can go first if you want, or I was going to.
No, I was just going to say again, as someone who lives in a jurisdiction where I got to see a program being used, I would argue that again, forget whether or not they're a first-time candidate, the person who is using public financing is probably having to be a lot more creative and on the ground in order for them to receive these funds, right? They don't have people who can, they can't host a fundraiser where it's like, come and be, I forgot what the names are, but where you can make up to a $6,000 contribution, right? They are raising small donor dollars. They are talking to a ton of more voters. They are having to reach out to people who traditionally might not give. And again, it is the will of the voter. So the vote, I do support anyone who thinks they have a case to make to the voters in the county, that they want to come in and work, for the betterment of the county. It's up to them, right? And it's up to voters to decide whether or not they want that person to serve them. But anyone should be able to opt in. And it doesn't take away from the work of incumbents and others who may have done work as well. It just means that you have to now step up and possibly consider a shift in your strategy because others are stepping in.
Yeah, and respectfully, Councilman, I'm not sure it's an entirely correct analysis to say that somebody could just jump in and raise this money having not done prior deeds, because in order to raise this money, they have to go to door to their neighbors, and they're only going to get money if they are recognized in their community for their prior deeds. So I'm not sure that that's a fair analysis to say that there's an incumbent who's not using the system, who's done good deeds, and someone who really hasn't done anything all of a sudden comes in and maxes out at 80,000. I don't think someone who has, I think there's a difference between name recognition as someone in your position who's in elected office versus someone who's not elected office. I think you're right, there is some degree of recognition for folks who aren't in elected office but do good deeds. But the magnitude of that name recognition is not comparable. And I think that's the point of this, is that this allows folks who have the really grassroots neighborly name recognition to be able to run and amplify those deeds that they've done in their community to maybe an entire district. So I think that's part of the point of this too, and so I think that's a bit of an unfair characterization to say that somebody could come in with no good deeds to their name and still meet this $80,000 or $75,000 limit.
I guess the issue for me, and I'm going to say it again, I know what it costs to run a campaign. I've run a few, and I'm telling you, $80,000, $75,000 is an awful lot of money for a council race in Baltimore County. The most expensive thing you're going to do in a council race is do a mailer. You need at least 3 mailers for somebody to know who you are. 3 mailers at $8,000 a piece, you're up to $24,000. Now you're talking about 6 mailers. 6 mailers get you at $48,000. And I'm just telling you, it just seems like an awful lot of money. And I'm talking, and you cannot compare us to Montgomery County and Prince George's County. Those places, the cost of everything there is so much more. They pay their council persons $135,000. We pay a council member $60,000. So the cost, you look at their budgets versus our budget, it's just, we're the 3rd largest jurisdiction. We are so far behind the money in terms of Prince George's and Montgomery County. But all of that said, that's the way I feel.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to stand here and, spend all day on the issue.
I'm curious because again, we're less familiar with the county. For District 6 and District 3, I think some of the races that have been more expensive in the last couple cycles, is your feeling that those candidates are, setting out 10 mailers where it's really just diminishing returns, they're raising money because they can, and it's not being that efficiently used? Or do you have a sense of how else they're spending that money? And you think like once they spend and raise 100K, the rest is sort of just not being very efficient? Is that your?
I'm sorry. Go back. Tell me, what races are we talking about?
I'm looking at the races where the both at least 2 candidates, the challenger and the winning candidate, have raised between 150 and 250K in the county. So I think that's District 6, District 3, maybe one other district in the last 2 cycles. I'm curious, do you have a sense of why they're raising and spending that much? If it's just wasting money, or if they're spending 10 mailers, or I'm curious, because that's clearly your experience and the experience in most of the districts, but we do have a couple of these districts in the county where it seems that they're raising and spending a lot more money. So I'm curious where that money is going and why those costs are higher.
Well, I guess that goes back to a lot of times I have to think of the individuals. The individuals help me. But it goes back to what I was saying before. In Baltimore County, a lot of money on at least elected officials are gone to public projects before campaign ever. In other words, if you really want to know as far as campaigns, you would have to look maybe a month out from election day and see what monies are spent then, and look at what they're spending it on, because that's where the campaign money comes in, not funding a baseball team or a community picnic a year before the election. So
it's just having some conversations with some of those candidates, because the incumbent is spending money on these community projects, but I'd be surprised if the challenger is while they're running for office.
Right.
Spending this amount of money.
The District 3, you can't knock on doors in a lot of the districts. I think that, so mailings become really key there.
So rural, yeah.
Yeah.
Who are the candidates in District 3? Wade and who else?
Todd Huff.
Is this the elections we're talking about?
Yeah, in 2014, it was Lori Taylor Mitchell and Todd Huff were in council District 3. That was pretty expensive. And then, yeah, Councilman Marks, your district versus Jeff Beard was pretty, oh no, sorry, Beard is in District 6. That was expensive again, Beard versus Bevins. And then Bevins district again in 2018 was again expensive. She spent 266 and won. Her challenger spent 186 and lost.
And you know where that probably 186 came from?
I care where it went. I don't care as much about where it came from.
Well, believe me when I'm telling you, the individuals, and I guess this is the part there, this is like the inside baseball. What happens in our business, sometimes you make a decision that people are happy with. Sometimes you make decisions that people are angry with. And when the people get angry at you, oftentimes, if they are very wealthy, they will fund somebody to come out and beat. And then you really rely on your friends to come to your aid to say, hey, look, I did this thing. It was the right thing to do, but now this person is very angry with me. Those things happen often.
Yeah, just one quick point also, just
I
in
can name
thinking
names,
about,
but I won't because I don't think it's fair.
just in thinking about like campaign expenses and all of that, and thinking about, a possible challenger, a young person, especially as you all are considering lowering the age for running for council and so forth, right? Knowing that someone who's stepping in might try and focus their campaign on reaching inactive, sporadic voters, right? And just going for that strategy alone is going to be an expensive race, right? Sending a mailer to those type of voters likely isn't going to get the support that you need, let alone a donation, right? You're probably having to run digital campaigns, right? Texting campaigns, hosting more on the ground events. I think even thinking beyond that, right? Folks need, even if you're running a campaign that is powered by interns and so forth, right? You are at least working to ensure that interns are getting paid a minimum wage, right? Like folks need funds to run a first-time candidate who is really trying to reach the greatest amount of voters, again, that they're assuming that they're having to go to voters that aren't supporting the incumbent already. They need funding in order to do that, in order to make the case to voters, and they need to be able to touch that universe of people at least 3 times before they likely get them to commit to even vote for them, let alone getting them to contribute. So I just want us to think about, the person who is opting into the program and running for the very first time. The woman who, wants to run, as there's very few women on the council, very, few people of color and so forth, how much more they're going to have to do in order to convince, unfortunately, people to support them. So I just want us to keep that in the center of all of this as we're considering, the program.
Joanne, is the fact that the difference between 85,000 and 100,000, should we be considering if that is, if I'm correct, like 60 people? Is that, it's not very many people really to.
No. We're okay with the 80. I mean, I'm fine with the 85. I think for us, it was going beyond that floor of 75. I think 85 is a good medium. I know.
But I mean, 100,000 is, with just 60 more people, it doesn't, anyhow,
Yeah, and I think
ultimately we don't know the right answer. Like these are, ask questions, try to figure out the right answer. I think we'll come up with a recommendation. We should obviously talk to more people. I think I'd be uncomfortable if it got lower than 75K, but anywhere in there, I don't know what the right answer is. We're just all using our best estimation on the benefits of each of the options. So wherever you all think you should settle.
Mm-hmm.
I like 80. I like 80.
Nervous when you went lower, but
yeah.
I like 80, and I like multiplying it by 7 to get to the amount for county executive.
80, it was? You said 80?
80, and then times 7, so $560,000.
Well, let's, okay, well.
Because we're at 5.
I like a lesser number because I guess at some point we got to be somewhat responsible, respectful of the citizens' money. I mean, we do tell the citizens no from time to time for other things that are important to them, traditional things, and we run out of money. So I can go with my number would I would I could probably live with the 75. I think 80, and maybe we're splitting hairs here, but I really think we probably should be somewhere around 60,000, to be quite frank. I think 60,000 you could run a good council race. I think $80,000 is an awful lot of money. It's a lot of money to run for office. A lot of money.
What is the per household cost of funding something like this?
Less than $2.
What do you mean the per household cost?
$2 taxpayer on average, you mean? Like how much it costs residents? I think it was like $2. This is like likely going to come up to less than a percentage of the county's budget. And that's not to say it's not significant, you know, and there are provisions that can be added for cases of emergencies. But, you know, I think that's a great point in remembering that voters, you know, this went to the voters. Voters wanted this. This obviously, we're not the deciding factor here. There will be hearings. Momentum is building throughout the country. I mean, throughout the state. We're certainly going to be working to turn out Baltimore County folks. We've even tweeted and sending messages, and that the meeting was happening today. So I'd argue there's going to be a lot more support than we'd expect, and that going for a low number, others who are considering a run for office would likely testify and say that it's too low as well. But it's $2 per taxpayer per year.
Well, I mean, that's a number that, believe me when I tell you, it's difficult to get to that number. And I'm not even going to say it's right or wrong or yes or no. The issue I'm talking about is when someone says, I want my road repaved, and we say no. When somebody says, I want this for this school, and we say no. And that's where I'm getting from when I'm talking about the amount of money that we're spending. And I'm trying to make this wagon not too heavy to carry. The fact of the matter is, if to be quite frank, if somebody were to really press some of these issues here, I think we would have a different. Let's just go with, you know what? Let's go with the 80,000.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with you know, what you're saying, Councilman, I understand is that, you know, we have to be very, very cognizant of how we're spending taxpayers' money. But I do want to say that, you know, if we are doing this program, right, like we're doing it, we're going to be giving, you know, even on your end, you said 60,000. We're going to be giving, you know, we're doing this program, we're going to be funding it. And so, you know, you're talking about the difference between $60,000 and $80,000, that $20,000 difference, when you spread it out, right, isn't going to make a giant difference in how much this program costs. But that small $20,000 difference will make a difference in, at least I believe, in making a first-time candidate viable or not. So it's kind of like, you know, we're going, you know, if we've already gone 99 yards, right? Let's make sure we go the full 100 to make sure that there's no chance that somebody opts into this program, but it's handicapped by the money that they're allowed to raise. Because we're already going to be funding it. We're all going to be funding it. So, you know, it's even more pointless if you fund it, but you fund it to a point where it's not really going to make a huge difference or handicap people. So.
I guess, you know, I'm smiling because I'm thinking about Kimberly Klasick, who raised $8 million and nobody was buying what she was selling. The reality is we can throw as much money as we want. What my goal would be is to make sure that person get an opportunity to say, here I am, I'm running for office. This is what I have to offer. And then the citizen, having seen that person, would be able to say, yes, I like you. No, I don't. I don't see where it does us much good to somehow say we want to make sure that a first-time person running for office gets enough money where he or she can win. Or a person who wakes up and says, I want to run for office, gets enough money to say they can win. At the end of the day, what's important is that the person has enough money to show that they're running for office and people can see their ideas and see their experience and see their background and then make a decision. I think when we start talking $75,000 and $80,000, we are at the upper end of what a campaign will cost in Baltimore County. Now, one of the things we talked about earlier, you're using examples of the most expensive races at the most expensive times. In terms of what I know happened during those races, you had some very wealthy individuals who were hell bent on getting rid of people. And then you had some other wealthy individuals who said, no, I'm going to come to this person's aid because I don't think it's right that you're going to get rid of this person. So that's what happened in those most expensive races. I don't think you should turn districts that don't have those very, very expensive races and don't have those very, very expensive races all the time as the norm, as that's going to be the base, the bottom. That's where we're going to err on the side of making sure people have more than enough money. More than enough money. I mean, that's definitely the argument that was made.
And this will be my last point of the day because I know we're already Common Cause has no position on Kim Klacik for anyone who is watching, but I think again, her campaign, whatever, unique, brought in a lot of money. I think what
$8
makes
million.
the public, no, I know, but what makes the publicly financed candidate, and granted, I don't know where most of her money came from. I'm assuming she had a lot of donors that were able to cut really big checks for her. I think the difference here with the publicly financed candidate is that they've had to spend a lot more time, talking to individuals in the county, right? That they're likely reaching a new base of donors. And we know that once an individual gives for the first time, assuming they're eligible to vote, they're more likely to vote, but more importantly, more likely to stay engaged if that person is elected into office. So even thinking about the issues where you're talking about the roads and so forth, if those are issues that constituents care about in the county, that will be reflected in the type of people that are elected into these positions because they've had to spend a lot more time talking to candidates, and candidates have had to spend a lot more time, understanding what folks care about. So it's all connected. This isn't a program that is built just to help a candidate win. It's to move towards a local government that is more reflective of what the constituents want in that county, right? And I can't speak to what issues there are and so forth, but I'm sure there might be some examples of times where, voters may have wanted something and it wasn't reflected, coming from people who represent them a lot of times because of where they're getting their money from, right? We know that just when we're looking at things like police reform.
That's an assumption. That's an assumption that you're making. And I'm here to tell you, having been in office and worked with my council colleagues, I'm here to tell you that does not happen. Most of the time, you're going to have people object to everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what it is, you're going to have people object. So because, people throw a lot of things around and say, candidates, if we somehow do this, the elected officials will be more responsive to the citizen. I'm here to tell you, the council members that I work with today, they all are very responsive to their constituents. They're very responsive.
I want to make sure that's not coming off as saying that you're not responsive. But what I'm saying is, and again, this isn't specific to Baltimore County. This is nationwide, right? Again, we know that special interests are at play and that certain times issues may come before elected officials and they don't necessarily follow the will of the people, right? We can see that in Annapolis when we're talking about police reforms, right? I think that's a great example. Candidates who are receiving money from the FOP are less likely to support.
Oh, don't go there. Don't go there, please.
I'm just giving an example.
We're getting too political here.
Okay. An example, but I just want to say.
Because I'm going to tell you that police reform bill does not reflect my constituents. So I'm going to say, let's stay on target. We're already late. Why don't we, we can either postpone these decisions or we can do them now.
Well, why don't, it's 5:36. I don't know about you, but I got other things I have to do. Why don't we're in no hurry right now. Why don't we have the recommendations that you gave, and why don't we just sit on those? And right now, any objections to coming back next time and picking up where we left off? I don't like meetings when they last too long. Any objections to picking this up at the next meeting?
That's fine if you want to do that. That's fine with me. Can we do it in a week? Can we
Do
do it
you
like
want to
next
do the
week this
same
time?
thing in terms of scheduling the next meeting?
Can we do it in a week?
In a week?
I just think, Julian, we should wrap this up. I think we're close, actually.
Well,
I feel like we were debating more on just philosophy, but actually we had a pretty close to a decision on that one. And I don't think the matrix will take that long.
Okay. You want to go with the 80 then?
I can live with 80.
And then multiply it by 7 to get this 560,000?
Well, you're talking,
For the county executive.
no, there was a tier, there was a breakdown of two different options. The first one amount was 7-1, and then it broke down
Oh,
based
okay.
on, you know,
Okay.
the break. It can get, you know, we had two options presented in front of us. And I tell you the truth, I'd rather us just come back and pick up where we left off. I don't want to belabor the point because I'm getting tired.
Okay,
That
why
sounds
don't-
good.
why- Yeah, why don't we pick another date though? But I'd like to do it sooner rather than later.
Look, I'm okay. I'm just not sure if everybody's capable of coming back in a week's notice.
How does everyone's schedule look for July 1st?
I got a few things there on July 1st.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can make it if I have to, but technically I'll be out of the office for the weekend.
Well, Joe, why don't you do the same you did this time? Shoot some dates around, or do everybody want to just pick some days now while we're together? Joe, where are you?
Yes. I am looking at a calendar. What about next Wednesday around the same time?
I'm booked till 5. I'm running a training.
I got
Yeah,
something
that's,
for
that's
4:30.
Got about 4 things going on, all of them spread out throughout the day. Wednesday the 30th.
Then maybe the following week, possibly Wednesday, July 7th.
I'm away. Sorry.
When you come back, Dave?
14th. I'm around the 15th.
Let's see.
We might need to go. Everyone's on tricky time.
How about this coming Monday? Can we do this coming Monday?
The 28th.
Yeah.
Works for me. The only day I can't do next week is Wednesday.
I cannot do the 28th. I think someone just said that.
Yeah, that's a although I don't play golf, I have to make an appearance at the Cannes Golf Tournament. And I don't know if I'm whatever they call it, kickoff, lunchtime. I don't know what the heck.
So let me throw something out there. I think what's clear is we're going to need one more meeting than we originally slated here for once a month, and we'd rather do this sooner than later. But why don't I message everybody tomorrow to see when they're absolutely out of town, so that we know those full days are blocked. And then, if necessary, what we can do is start staggering these 3 weeks at a time, instead of a full month, so that we end up with an extra meeting by the end of it. So that if we can't get to this until, say, July 19th or 20th, then we can go second week of August to first week of September. We added an extra meeting by that method.
That work.
Okay, so I'll be in touch tomorrow and start getting everybody's availability.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all your participation. It was a nice spirited discussion. I enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.